Hello and welcome to LSUTV's election night coverage. It's been one of the most tumultuous nights in election history, in recent election history. And in the studio with me to analyse it all, Amie, Woodyatt and Ben Cooke. How are you both?
Well, you?
Well, you? Excited and a little bit shocked at some of the things we've just seen on different news channels, but hopefully it's going to be an interesting evening, and yeah, I'm excited to see how it goes and how the actual results come out.
Yeah, definitely excited to see what the result is here in Loughborough, and excited to see what the results are around the country as they come in over the next couple of hours.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm sure you're going to see in a few moments' time the exit poll pop up on your screen. That's performed by the BBC, Sky and Ipsos Mori. It's extraordinary, really. Conservatives on 368 seats, Labour on 191. Others, obviously, ranging, and obviously the Brexit Party getting no seats at all. It's an evening which will be solemn for some and joyous for others. How do you think that the parties are going to react to this?
I think just going off the exit poll, the Conservatives are probably going to be feeling quite confident at the moment. But obviously that could change. You know, we can't take the exit poll as fact at the moment. And I think it's going to be interesting on how the university seats are going to change as well. So obviously Loughborough has had students staying here and making sure that they go out and vote. And it will be interesting to see if things actually continue and go along as the exit poll says. So.
Yeah, I think it's really, really interesting to have an exit poll like that. Obviously, we've seen exit polls in the past. They've not necessarily been correct, but they are usually a reasonable indicator of how the country's voting.
So for 2010, they changed the election polling system and realised, OK, let's not have an opinion poll, but let's actually ask people what they said and what they voted for. And really, you know, it's been reasonably realistic. I think everyone can remember that moment in 2015 when, you know, the Lib Dems and Paddy Ashton said, actually, I'm going to eat my hat if this exit poll is correct. And it was for the Lib Dems there. Again, not a great night for the Lib Dem again. I'm assuming Paddy Ashton's not going to come up on screen and say that he's going to eat his hat once again. Only 13 seats. That is up from 7 at the last election, but it is down from what they currently have in Parliament. You know, not a great night for them.
No, I think it's been a pretty poor night for the Lib Dems. You'd have hoped with the way politics has gone over the last couple of months that a centrist party would have started to regain some ground. They've gained some, but by no means anywhere near their 2010 levels to have any realistic hope of being part of a government. The exit poll was quite clearly shown that the Tories, the exit polls predicted that they will have a majority. That would form them a very, very strong Conservative government. And
worse for the Dems, we're just hearing that it's possible that Jo Swinson herself might lose her seat up in Scotland. This would be dramatic. You don't often see party leaders losing their seat. I think many people maybe thought that Boris Johnson might lose his seat because of a really big push by the Labour Party there in what was traditionally has been a Labour stronghold. So it'll be interesting to see if Jo Swinson managed to keep her seat, managed to keep composed and calm and in the election period. But it's looking like it will be close.
I think it's quite big for Lib Dems as well, just in that I think a lot of people have tactically voted in this election. And I think that could have cost Lib Dems quite a lot because I know quite a few Lib Dem supporters that have voted Labour, whether that's on different policies. I know Brexit is quite a key one. But yeah, I think Lib Dems could have suffered because a lot of people don't want Conservatives to get in. And I think Brexit Party, who have in the exit poll got no seats. I think they will have potentially suffered because people have been tactically voting for the Conservatives for the opposite reasons. So I think a lot of the smaller parties will have suffered in this because a lot of people are afraid of one of the big two.
I mean, it looks like we're going to have our first result coming up in the next 15 minutes, half an hour. Notoriously, Newcastle and Sunderland have a battle between them to determine who actually is going to have this winning right. Obviously, they've got a huge footballing rivalry there, Sunderland and Newcastle. Newcastle in the Premier League and Sunderland way down in League One still, sadly for them. Who will it be who wins this time? Last year, Newcastle came up on top. this year, will Sunderland and Horton and Sunderland South, will they take their crown back? Other people are saying there could be other seats that are coming on. We'll see. The BBC have got some sources saying that there's a couple of other contenders trying to really beat them this year. Yeah. We know Charnwood. Personally, we know they're going to try and push forward to 4 a.m. this morning. We'll be with you for that one at 4 a.m. as well. So we'll see how that one goes. But we're expecting a result within the next 5 or 10 minutes here. A bit later than last year. It only took them about 40 minutes last year to count all of the ballots from Newcastle Central. Been a bit longer this year.
Well, I don't know. I don't know about you, but I had to queue up when I went to vote this morning. I think there's been a lot of interest in this election. I don't know what the turnout will be. I wouldn't be surprised if it was higher than we saw last time, just because Brexit has become such a contentious issue that everyone wants to. Okay, this isn't a referendum again by any means, but everyone wants to have their say, whatever that may be, for the future government that will eventually deliver Brexit or not, as the case is for some of the political parties.
I mean, Sky Sky dubbed this election the Brexit election. Do you think this is actually causing problems in terms of people treating this as a referendum, essentially, rather than what should be a general election?
I think it's certainly polarised certain aspects of the vote. I think it's been quite interesting to see how Labour over the past couple of weeks, where the Tories came into this election thinking that it would be a single issue election, that there would only be one thing on the table, and that would be the only thing that anyone cared about.
It's very interesting. We're potentially hearing that we might end up with a 52-48 scenario again, in terms of parties that have voted for Brexit and parties who have voted for Remain. It's looking like it's going to be really, really close between a kind of a Brexit party Conservative vote alliance. We're not obviously don't have a seat. They've got a seat alliance as well, but in terms of votes, we'll be very close to what the Remain parties or the traditional Remain parties will be getting. Possibly flip the other way around to what we expected before. But in seats, that's not going to come through. So we've got a very different effect here with our voting system and what we're going to get. Essentially by saying that we've got 368 Conservative seats, you'd be expecting something like 60-odd% of the vote. It's unlikely they're going to get that.
Yeah, that's extremely unlikely with the voting system we currently have. With the first past the post system, it really only matters that you beat the person who comes second. It doesn't actually matter nationally what the percentage of your vote is.
That's true.
It's the same as America. It doesn't, as Donald Trump proved us, it doesn't actually matter what percentage of the vote you get. You can still win if you manage to play the system well enough. I suspect the Tories may have a similar strategy, just purely because of the number of seats in which they won't necessarily get a majority, but they will beat second place.
I think they've definitely played the Brexit card. I think all parties have played the Brexit card, which I think it is such an important topic at the moment. However, I think it is unfortunate that I think it's definitely impacted how people have voted, and I think, as you said, this hasn't necessarily been a referendum. Not a referendum. It has been a referendum, and it hasn't necessarily been a general election. So, yeah, I think it's unfortunate in some ways, but it's something very important that is happening at the moment, and it's going to affect everyday life in the UK. So I think it's going to be something that's very important for how parties say they're going to cope with it, and therefore who people vote for. So while it kind of impacts the election, it should impact the election. So it's good and bad.
It's looking like potentially we might be seeing a result from Blyth Valley coming soon, which is currently a Labour seat. It's a Labour marginal seat. They told the press that they would be releasing results at 5 a.m. It's now looking like they've been releasing within potentially the next 10 minutes, is what we're hearing.
What?
However, the MRP poll said that this one will be will be retained by Labour, but only with a 4% majority. They had 7,900 votes last time, majority over the Conservative Party. So it'll be interesting to see where Blyth Valley goes this time. Who will take this seat? It's going to be very, very interesting. Also interesting to see that that we're essentially not going to have Newcastle or Sunderland potentially going first. We'll see what happens.
That would be an incredible upset if Blyth Valley managed to get a result in before Newcastle or Sunderland, who have quite established themselves as the leaders. Sunderland have done it for 6 years in a row, I think. Newcastle beat them last year, as you mentioned. But if Blyth are managing to somehow miraculously turn a 5 a.m. Result into a pre-midnight result, that would be quite something to see.
Well, apparently it's partly due to a low postal vote number, because when we have more postal votes, it takes a bit longer to go through all of these. So that could be very interesting. You know, actually, what is the effect of people who are voting early? You know, when people are voting early in Blyth Valley, are they more likely to vote for the Conservatives? Obviously, Labour had a little bit of an uptick in the polls more recently. Will that seat go potentially to the Conservatives? We don't yet know. It's looking like it'll be a really close one, and a really interesting one to go off first, because you know, normally your Newcastles and the Sunderlands are all very heavy, very heavy Labour seats.
They're extremely safe Labour seats, as you say, but to go to something with turning a 7,000 majority into possibly with 7%, you'd be looking at 2,000 maybe, which would almost make it marginal.
Well, according to the BBC, they've now released extra polling, which is it's a 56% chance of a Conservative gain, a 44% chance of a Labour hold. It is too close to call, but they're going closer on the Conservatives. So we could see our first seat of the night to be a Labour loss and a Conservative gain, which would be unprecedented, not seen in electoral history for decades. Today will be an unprecedented night, but obviously it's also important to look at what's happening in Loughborough here as well. Loughborough, a seat which is marginal, which only has a 7,000 majority last time. It's going to be an interesting seat, potentially less interesting than we thought it might have been before this evening. But let's have a look at what our reporter found out when he went to one of Loughborough University's polling stations earlier in the day and found out a little bit more about Loughborough.
Hello and welcome to a rather cold and wet afternoon here in Loughborough, as polling is currently underway with loads of students casting their vote in what has been dubbed the Brexit election. Loughborough has been emphasised as a key constituency for both Conservative and Labour, with it being labelled as a battleground in this election. The Loughborough constituency has flipped between Labour and Conservative over the past 50 years. In 2017, Nicky Morgan's majority was more than halved, in part due to a greater turnout in young voters. This year, with a new Conservative candidate from the constituency and increasing political engagement from young voters, could we see Loughborough turn red? Here in Loughborough, the turnout of the student population could be influential in determining who becomes the MP for this constituency. However, with this being the end of term, the impact of this is still yet to be seen. With Brexit being a crucial topic in this election, parties' stance on Brexit could prove key in Loughborough, with Charnwood having voted in favour of leave by 53.8% in 2016. With this being a winter election and today's weather being notably poor, this could have further implications for turnout today. This has been Josh Thompson reporting for LSUTV in Loughborough.
Well, thank you very much there for our roving reporter Josh, who'll be here in the studio later on this evening. We're switching things up a bit. A few more presenters. It's going to get a little bit tiring, so we think we'll rotate it around a little bit throughout the night.
I think we'll need it.
Exactly. We're just hearing potentially that the Tories may have the youngest ever MP, one of the youngest ever MPs to be inducted into the House of Parliament in Hinburn this evening, where 24-year-old Sarah Blyth may become the youngest ever MP in recent times. We've had young ones in the past with 19-year-olds, but currently that would make her the youngest MP. Loughborough, obviously, full of young people. Candidates weren't that young. Could that be a reason why they didn't appeal maybe to the students enough? Looking at this, this exit poll.
I mean, we actually had one student running for the Green Party, Wes, and currently I believe that Conservatives are polled to win here.
They are. The BBC are looking for a 99% plus certainty now. It's almost moving to 100% certainty. I think they're very wary. They don't want to go too full
on. So I think that's interesting that we actually had a student running, and yet we still apparently have voted Conservative.
It'd be interesting to see if those votes for Wes Wharton, who was the Green Party candidate, maybe take some of that majority and that chance of winning away from the Labour candidate. Liberal Democrats obviously weren't particularly in the race to start with, sadly. It's not a particularly competitive seat, this, which makes it less interesting for us in the studio. But you do get that that nice two-party race is, I guess, more traditional. But Loughborough, you could end up having a large majority here for the Conservatives. Do you think it might go up compared to the last election? Do you think we'll have more of a majority?
I don't see it myself. If you look at the past 2 election results, there was a majority of 9,000, followed by a majority of 4,000. This time, with the students being here as well, which will help push up, like you would have thought that would help push up the Labour vote, it might get even closer. So if the Tories do hold it, I think it may be a similar result to last time, in that it is a reasonable majority, but it's by no means a completely safe seat.
Because we thought the Nicky Morgan factor might have some kind of effect. Nicky Morgan leaving, would that make the Tories more attractive to some voters, and would it detract them from other voters? She was reasonably popular around the area, especially among Conservative voters, but also just generally. She was a cabinet minister, a reasonably important MP in the grand scheme of things. So when you look at it, it could have helped them, it could have hindered them. Do you think maybe not as much of an effect as maybe we'd forecasted?
And generally, I think she was actually she was a very good local constituency MP. She had a number of surgeries, a number of drop-ins, even while being a cabinet minister. So I think actually the town as a whole quite liked her. So I don't know how much bearing that will play. Obviously, students are a bit further drawn away from that. They're not too bothered about how easy it is to contact their MP as opposed to some other voting groups. But that certainly would have had some sort of impact.
I think as well, Nicky Morgan didn't necessarily... this is going to have slight opinion here. Didn't necessarily be involved with the university as much as she is with the town. And obviously, it's a reasonably large seat. It's not dominated by university students. So despite the fact that, if we hadn't been here to vote, I think it would have still been completely different, and we probably have, made an effect on the vote. But I think, as far as the students are concerned, Nicky Morgan wasn't necessarily as involved, and I think, it'll be interesting to see how we kind of actually turn out with the vote here, and what demographics voted for different parties. I think that's going to be kind of the important thing for the Loughborough constituency. And
I think it's fair to say that if the students hadn't been here and it had been at a completely different time of year, I think you could probably fairly safely say that it would have retained, yes, that it would have removed all aspect of variability, and it would have probably been a safe Tory seat.
Yeah, you could argue that last time, the June election back in 2017, the exam season being on and quarter deadlines might have put some people off voting, thinking maybe, smash out another 100 words in your essay rather than going down to the polling station and vote. This time, not much of an excuse for most people. They should have gone out and voted. We will see if that's had the effect that it's had. Interestingly, it's looking like one of the oldest MPs and one of the longest serving MPs, Dennis Skinner, might lose his seat in Bolsover. He's known as the Beast of Bolsover. He's been inside the House of Parliament continuously since 1970. He traditionally has a lot of traditional things. He shouts a lot during the Queen's speech. He is part and parcel of Parliament and will be very much missed by all sides. It'll be very interesting here to see what's going on. But Blyth Valley look like they're going to be the first ones to have the result, because Sunderland might have a recount on. So, generally, if you've got a recount, that means the result might be quite close. I don't think anyone would ever say that the Conservatives would win Sunderland Central, but Blyth Valley look like they're announcing the results now. Horton and Sunderland South have a majority. There was a majority of 12,000 there. Blyth Valley, there was a majority not as big. It was 7,900. We'll see what that is in a few seconds' time. But big result here. If the Conservatives can take Blyth Valley, it might happen. And again, Sunderland, if that goes,
for Sunderland to have a recount, as you say, it must be quite close, which would be a huge worry to Labour at this point, because you would have hoped that your northeast strongholds, your Labour heartlands, you would be able to maintain those, even with the added pressure of Brexit.
And we can actually announce there is a recount in Blyth Valley. So that one's going to be close as well. The returning officer went up on stage and announced a recount rather than that. So Blyth Valley, expect another hour or so on that result. This is what happens a lot on election night. You get very excited about very small things like Blyth Valley potentially having a result, and instead you end up with a recount. Potentially, something might happen here in Loughborough if that election gets close. Obviously, candidates can call a recount if that election result gets close. Do you think that's something that we might see later on?
I mean, generally you would only call a recount if it's within the couple of hundred votes margin and you thought that it was reasonably favourable towards you. In Loughborough, I don't see it being that close. I may have to eat my words later, but I don't see it being that close.
I'm sure we'll play that exact clip.
Thank you, thank you. I'm glad.
We'll make sure that's
if Labour's like 3 votes, yeah.
But and we've had very interesting quotes today. Just a minute ago from Kate Hoey, who was a former Labour MP who decided to resign this election and not continue her seat. Very much Brexit supporting MP. Said that actually the Conservative Party are now out of touch with the working class people who voted to leave in the Brexit referendum back in 3 years now. I mean, it's been a long time, but we're still in the same situation that we're in. Do you think that the Labour Party are in maybe a situation where they're losing trust from the voters?
I think it's very difficult to consider at this point. Even if people are, recounting and things are going to be quite tight, I think it's dangerous to kind of suggest what's going to happen at this point. But I think both Labour and Conservatives have lost some faith, and I think that purely because so many people I know have voted Labour because they don't like the leadership of the Conservatives, and so many people have voted Conservative because they don't like the leadership of Labour. And I think purely who comes out to vote and what the actual polls show at the end of the night will show which party has not necessarily maintained faith, but just got people out to vote.
So it's one of those situations where it's very difficult. Mark Francois, and there is this rhetoric now that's going to come on after this, after this result. When we look back at it tomorrow morning or tomorrow midday, whenever when everything is counted up, it's looking like politics might get a little bit sour this evening. It's looking like things might not be quite as we imagined. If it was, going to be a close election, you often get quite docile tones from both sides, but there's going to be Labour MPs who are very angry, who have lost their seats, and those who have not decided to run an election. There are going to be Conservatives like Mark Francois, who has just compared the Conservative majority to the fall of the Berlin Wall, saying that British people have, and I quote, resoundingly defeated Labour's Marxist option. Language only an hour and 25 minutes into this election night. It's going to be an interesting one, not only in terms of results, but in terms of the kind of effect this has on the British political landscape and people.
But I think that's only language that you could expect to hear after the past 6 months. Like, it's fair to say that the face of politics has changed, and with language like that coming out so soon after, just based on exit polls at this point, is I would say a tad brave.
A tad brave.
But it may not be wrong. That's his opinion. He's entitled to it. I'm not sure I agree, but that's how it is.
It's going to be an effect that I think not many people want in British politics. They don't want this angry, kind of divisive tone, but it's something that's been kind of embedded in British politics for the last few years.
I think that's been growing significantly for the last few years, partly because of Brexit. And because of a lot of divides that are currently happening between different parties and within different parties. But yeah, I think to say something like that at this stage is very bold. But I suppose we will see if it's backed up by the end of the night. But I think we've actually got Newcastle coming through quite soon, so
we'll see how that result goes there.
Yes.
The fact that Newcastle's gone through very quickly implies to me that it's a reasonably safe bet that Labour will have controlled this one. We'll find out in a second. But Newcastle Central, a seat which has a very large Labour majority. Not only were there 15,000 more Labour votes than Tory votes last time, MRP predicted a 38% lead, one of the biggest. Turnout, very big, so we'll see how this goes. The first result is in, it's Newcastle. Labour have got 21,568, Conservatives on 9,290. That's a majority of 12,000. That is reduced by 2,000 votes compared to last time. That is kind of what MRP predicted. The turnout reasonably high at 64% of the vote there. It's looking like it might be the swing that we thought was going to happen.
Yeah, and with as you say, the turnout being so high is quite interesting. I don't know actually how that compares to last time, but the turnout in Blyth is about 64% as well. The returning officer confirmed when they came up on stage. Thankfully, in Blyth, it's only a bundle recount, so it should be quicker than the hour you said earlier.
Hopefully,
it should be 20 minutes.
I mean, a full recount obviously obviously involves the recount of every single ballot paper. A bundle recount actually counts the bundles of 100 ballots that they've got there. It's more of a check of generally how we're going to go. Hopefully, we don't see one of these later on in Loughborough, because if so, our correspondent Paul, who is down there at the count for us, will have quite a difficult time if he's there until 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning. But Paul, please do let us know how it's going over there at the Loughborough Leisure Centre for us.
It's going well. The results are expected to be at about 4 or 5 a.m, so it will be a long night for us. Both seats are expected to be Conservative holds, which is not ideal. But we will keep you updated as and when we get the information.
Yeah, I think it'd be very interesting to, it would have been nice to have something a bit more exciting over there rather than just, kind of a continuation of what's currently been going on. But we'll see, we'll see how it goes. Hopefully Paul will come back to us in a second. We're having a little bit of a connection issue over there. It's a very large distance from about half a kilometre away from where we are now. Very difficult to go over that kind of distance. As you know, we're very thankful for our technical teams who have worked very hard on this over the last few days. However, a Conservative majority in both seats is going to be very continuous. We're not really changing much there. It's not as interesting as you might have hoped.
I mean, yeah, I think, if the Conservatives do keep here, then I think it is a Conservative, not stronghold, but almost safe seat for this one. And I think it will mainly be the student population, the younger demographic that may be unsatisfied with that. But I think realistically it's going to be something that we can work with. So.
And again, we've now got another result coming through from Horton and Sutherland South. They've been pipped to the post by Newcastle by about 5 minutes, bless them. It's not their fault, obviously. I'm sure they did a fantastic job there, but you did lose. So the crown has been once again taken by Newcastle, who in recent years are doing a fantastic job there. But the key thing about this one is the majority. The majority has decreased hugely. It was 12,300 at the last election, and it's now only 3,000.
Wow.
With Labour's Bridget Phillipson, the candidate who's been there before, on 16,000, the Conservatives on 13,000. This is unprecedented.
That's fair.
Essentially, pretty much the votes that she got, that Bridget has got, the now MP for Horton and Sutherland South, are almost the same as the majority that she had only 2 years ago. This is kind of a collapse of the party, surely.
And I think it's very interesting in that same result, the Brexit Party only got 6,000 votes. Or maybe that should be the Brexit Party got 6,000 votes is surprising at all, being that in quite a lot of these seats, especially we know that Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson had agreement where the Brexit Party will stand aside in Tory seats. So I think it's quite interesting that possibly the Tory vote has been split there, or rather, should I say, the Brexit vote has been split there between the Tories and the Brexit Party.
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting that Labour have
I'm going to interrupt you there
lost.
because we've had the biggest news of the evening, and it's the third seat of the night that we've had, again, from the Conservative Party. This is not a regular occurrence, and we'll go back to Horton and Sutherland South and the Brexit Party in a minute because that is very interesting. But more interesting is Ian Levy, who has taken the seat from Susan Dungworth in Blyth Valley. Blyth Valley, a seat that had a 7,900 majority last time in 2017, and now has a 712 vote majority in the Conservative Party now. This is the first seat of the night. If you know, look at Horton and Sutherland South, that was a reduction of around, possibly around 7,000 votes there. Blyth Valley, around another 7,000 votes reduction there. If this is a trend, this is a trend that will be catastrophic for the Labour Party.
Absolutely catastrophic. I imagine they're probably currently sat going, "Oh my goodness." I mean, that's absolutely huge. We've just heard that Labour have gone down 15% at Blyth Valley. Catastrophic is the correct term for the Labour Party here. I think the Conservatives will be taking a lot of confidence at this point because that's showing that it's huge for them. And to have usually we have a lot of Labour votes coming through in the early night. I think in the last election, the first 7 or something seats were all Labour, and then we only had a couple of Conservatives get a huge red in the beginning of the evening. To already have Conservative and to have big Labour losses, huge for Conservatives, amazing, but must be devastating for Labour and could potentially be very, very negative for the party overall.
I mean, if you looked at this before about 2 hours ago, before the exit poll came out, and to be honest, even when this exit poll came out, you would not expect Blyth Valley, a seat which is Labour through and through, and I'm sure we'll get some statistics on this in a few moments, but this is a Labour heartland seat. Mm-hmm. This is not a seat that Labour should be losing. Granted, it had a Leave majority at the last election, but it was a 60% Leave seat, but that's not the biggest in the country. This is a seat that Labour should really have been holding on to, one with an 8,000 majority.
Labour should be holding on to these seats, exactly as you say. We saw a 7,000 vote reduction in Sunderland, an 8,000 seat reduction here in Blyth Valley. It's quite an incredible shift that we've seen.
And in fact, I can reveal to you that Blyth Valley has never been anything other than Labour.
That doesn't surprise me.
The seat of Blyth Valley, which was created in 1950, under the former constituency of Blyth, this is the first time that this seat has ever been anything other than Labour. But there was an independent Labour candidate in February 1974, which lasted until October 1974. But even then, they were an independent Labour candidate. 74 was a fantastic year. 2 elections in 1 year. What a great year.
God.
But this is
that's unprecedented.
And it's being reflected in the headlines that I'm looking at. The Mirror leading with it being a nightmare for Labour. The Sun have led with a picture of Boris Johnson and his dog, saying the dogs for some reason. The Mail have said, rejoice, Boris set for presumably...
I do love how...
Presumably a victory.
I do love how impartial that all of these are.
Oh, the papers are so impartial, it's great.
Nothing like here on LSUTV where
no. And the Independent have led with it being a blue tide. So I think we could see that the print media have quite decided which result they would prefer and which result that they're on the side of.
But if we're looking at this, if we're looking at people... We're looking at people like Blyth Valley and MPs there who would not have been expecting to win this evening. Candidates like Stuart Brady could have had a reasonable, not just a hope, but kind of an expectation that they had the votes there if they just got them out. But in Blyth Valley, you do not expect to turn a seat to the Conservative for the first time in history.
And I think actually that kind of thing will actually be quite frightening to people like Stuart Brady here in Loughborough, because I know so many people, so many students have gone out to vote. Like you said, they were queuing this morning. It's been massive on social media. Everyone has been making sure that they share the little go and vote thing on Instagram and on Facebook. And so many students have gone out and voted. But if places that have been Labour for the entire time they've been a seat are now Conservative, that's going to be frightening.
I mean, it's a northeastern mining town. This is not a place where the Conservatives, like, no offence to the Conservative Party, but you shouldn't be here. This is not where your heartland is. And the fact that they're winning in Blyth, they're winning it, but they're getting close to winning in places like Newcastle and Sunderland, where majorities are getting, this is the Labour Northern Wall being knocked down.
Yeah. So perhaps the exit poll that we saw isn't actually that far from the truth. It's far too early to say what's right and what's wrong at this point. But
that is the traditional broadcasting.
That's the traditional. It is far too early. We've had 4 seats, or three seats.
Come on, don't get ahead of yourself. 3 seats.
I want the 4th. I want something else to talk about.
But no, it's going to be a very interesting one. Already we've had a Conservative gain. Already we've had a Labour loss. But we're going to have a look now at the candidates from Loughborough. Last week we had a debate here at LSU where each candidate went through and had a little chat to all of the people in the audience and online about their campaign, their ideas and what they are passionate about. These were their opening statements. So let's get right into it with tonight's opening statements. Stuart.
Am I standing for this? Yeah. Good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. This election is for your future. And that's why you need to stay here and vote on Thursday and vote Labour. It's a 2-horse race in Loughborough between me and the Conservative candidate. We are offering you another say on Brexit. We are offering you the most decisive action on climate change of any of the parties. We are offering you a tuition fee policy that gets rid of tuition fees for any remaining years you have in university. There are 3 fully costed policies. And importantly, we're going to take action to save our NHS. We know we've got a mental health crisis and Labour's going to address it.
Thank you. Queenie.
Yeah, all good. Just got my mouth full of biscuit. Sorry. So, hello, I'm Queenie T, and on the 12th of December, I'm going to be having a party, as are all the rest of these lovely folk. And what I'd like you to do is, if none of these parties, now they're very good at parties, Jane down there has been having a good party for about 9 years. Then we have Wesley, he's really good at parties because he's a student. And then we have Ian and Stu Pot. Now they're new to running parties, but I imagine they're very good on the dance floor.
Thank you very much.
So thank you, yes.
Thank you very much. Where's Walton?
Hi, I'm Wes. Thank you all for coming. I'm standing because the Green Party's vision of the future is a goal to strive for, a future where we cooperate with other nations to solve the problems that we face, a future where individuals feel empowered by the government, not forever let down, a future where quality of life and happiness are put at the heart of policy making and not forever chasing economic growth and GDP.
Thank you very much. Ian.
Hi, I'm Ian Sharp. I'm the Liberal Democrat candidate, and only a few months ago in the Euro elections, Loughborough voted us the most important Remain party, and in fact we got twice the votes that the Labour Party got. So thanks, Stuart, but we do this every time, he knows what I'm going to say. Right, so I'm standing to fight for the NHS and social care, to fight for our schools, colleges, universities and for lifelong learning, to fight the mess in universal credit, to fight climate change and to fight Brexit. I'm Ian Sharp, I'm your Liberal Democrat Remain candidate.
Thank you, Ian. And finally, Jane.
Thank you very much. Hello, I'm Jane Hunt. I am local, I've lived here since 1995, and during that time I've been the Borough Councillor in Loughborough and Panton Ward for 12 years, between 2003 and 2015, and that is half the campus. So I have been the Borough Councillor for half the campus for 12 years during that time. I want to make you an offer. Inward investment is one of the things I look after at the Borough Council, and inward investment is about brains, skills and knowledge, and we want to keep you in Loughborough. Please, please do let me know what exactly you would like from the area so that we can get you to stay here, keep your businesses here, keep your brains here, and form businesses here. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, there you go. So those were the opening statements from all the candidates there. Obviously, you can't vote anymore. However, it's really important to make sure that you know what your candidates are saying. All of them, including independents, those you may not expect to win. It's important to have those views in an election. Making sure that all voices are heard.
Yeah, I really enjoyed watching the debate that the candidates had the other day. I thought it was actually really useful to prepare to vote, to see who, because that's the thing, you're electing both a national party, but you're equally electing local representatives. And I thought all the candidates that came down, I thought they all put on a really good show, actually.
I think the key thing that we've got here is that the Brexit Party didn't run in Loughborough. And this is obviously because they're electoral pact with the Conservatives, which meant that any seat that was Conservative held in the last election, whether it was currently Conservative or not, was not going to be contested by the Brexit Party. And this is probably a good thing for the Conservative Party, because as we can see if we look back at the result from Horton and Sunderland South, there's a very interesting dynamic going on here between Labour, the Conservative Party, and the Brexit Party. That being that potentially, if the Brexit Party hadn't have been running, and all of those votes had gone to the Conservative Party, if not even all of them had gone to the Conservative Party, just a mere 3,000 of them, we could essentially have had a Conservative seat. Those 3,000 votes, if there would have been another 3,000 votes, they could have had a 3,000 vote majority, the Brexit Party, the Conservative Party in Horton and Sunderland South, if the Brexit Party hadn't have run themselves. And this dynamic again, you can kind of see in Blyth Valley. 3,000 votes going to the Brexit Party that were taken away for the Conservative Party. They would have had maybe a larger majority than 700. This Brexit Party story, they may not get any seats, but it's not over, is it?
Not by any means. I think it's really, really interesting that partly that they're taking so much of the vote. This is, of course, assuming that everyone who voted for the Brexit Party would then have voted for the Conservatives had they not have run in these seats. But equally, a 3,000 seat Tory majority in Sunderland would have been an even bigger upset than Blyth Valley.
Absolutely. We're getting more declarations across the country happening very soon in places like Swindon, and obviously there'll be places in the other Newcastle seats that are obviously in the same count. They usually kind of reach them around 10 minutes apart. But what we've not mentioned so far today a lot is the Liberal Democrats. And a very interesting one here of the man Zach Goldsmith, man who ran for Tory, the Tory candidate for the London Mayor a few years ago now, about 3 years ago. And a man who is very divisive, not only generally, but also in the Tory party, not particularly a popular figure. And it looks like he may be losing his seat in Richmond to the Liberal Democrats, which would be a massive gain from them.
Yeah, that would be a huge shock, actually. Because Zach Goldsmith, we know a couple of years ago he ran for London Mayor. Granted, he didn't run on quite a hard right-wing stance as some Tory mayors have in the past, but it was quite interesting to see how he lost that election, even though he presented quite a fairly centre-right viewpoint.
And a key part of this seat is the very, very small majority. A majority of 45 votes. It will be close. I can almost guarantee that there will be a recount happening in this one. I think there's no one who can really deny that. But when you're looking at this kind of seat where Lib Dems might be gaining this kind of thing, it's a very Remain seat. 29% was the Brexit vote there in the referendum. You're looking at 71% here for Remain. It's a huge Remain stronghold. Is this the place where the Lib Dems can kind of claw back a bit of strength in these massive Remain strongholds?
I think they need to. But then I think they are only going to be able to claw back in a few, and I think if the exit polls are anything to go off, they will claw back a few, and they'll claw back more than they did in 2017, which is very good for them. But yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting to see the words have gone completely out of my head. How close they are.
Yeah, and I think that very thin majority,
yes,
which may be expected, could be interesting. But also, it'd be interesting if it's if we get a large majority, if we get a huge kind of couple of thousand majority, which kind of the MRP poll was saying they were expecting maybe a 10% swing, 10-point swing there. You could end up with the Lib Dems are quite comfortable in Richmond, which they were a few years ago, but haven't been for a while.
Yeah, they traditionally do reasonably well in south-west London. There's a couple of seats around there where, okay, they haven't necessarily won, but they're at least close. They're definitely second compared to Labour, which is the opposite of what you would see in some other parts of the capital. But just having the Lib Dems there as a threat, even if they're not actually in power, may have quite a significant influence on what policies go ahead and what the manifesto choices, or maybe what their election campaigning material is in those areas. But let's face it, we don't really care about the Lib Dems, we don't care about the Conservatives, we don't care about Labour. Who we really care about is Count Beanface. Count Beanface is standing against Boris Johnson. He's arrived to try and unseat in his campaign, his intergalactic campaign, I believe, to try and unseat Boris Johnson. Quite a task, to come all his way just to unseat Boris Johnson. Failed as Lord Buckhead, a few years ago with Theresa May. He did gain quite a few votes though, so it'll be interesting to see how many votes he does gain against the Tory candidate Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister himself. Well, it is quite interesting in Uxbridge. I believe there's 14 candidates running, just because there are so many independents, along with you've got both Count Beanface and Lord Buckethead this time. It's going to be. Do we think the intergalactic vote will be split?
Well, now that is the battle of the century. Surely, we need to look very deep and very hard at whether it'll be Lord Buckethead or Count Beanface winning that seat. In terms of the little battle between them, not the actual seat itself.
Probably the battle for 10th or something at this point.
That's going to be the big battle of the night, I think. But you get lots of protest candidates. You get people from smaller parties, like the English Democrats or parties like that. They have very niche single party issues. But protest doesn't often, it doesn't just happen in politics. Protest is a natural part of British way of life. And strikes are also a key part of this as well, as we've seen recently here in Loughborough. Now, Amie, you went down to the strikes and had a little chat with those who were there.
Yeah, it was actually very interesting. We got quite a few points of view from the people that, the lecturers that were on strike. We also obviously had the university statement, and we had a chat to Anna Maria from LSU as well. And it was very interesting. I think we've got a little cut from that as well. So if we'd like to,
it'll be interesting to see if that affects the result at all. Whether people, maybe protesting, maybe a little bit against the strikes, maybe they're going to vote for a certain party or not. We'll see.
Over the next week, we may be seeing several more empty lecture theatres just like this, due to strikes currently occurring across campus. The details relating to the strike are complex. In short, there are two national legal disputes, one on pensions and the other on pay and working conditions.
Still, we haven't got a satisfactory resolution to the pensions issue, and demanding, of course, more pay, because in real terms we've had pay cuts most years. But we've also got some local issues across the country, but locally here, gender pay gap, the casualisation of work, and also workload. And with these, we've had good negotiations with senior management in the university to try to address these ones. The reason the strike, though, is going on for the 8 days is on pensions and pay, because these can only be dealt with nationally.
How have you been finding that strikes have affected you this year?
Okay, I've only had one lecture that's been cancelled, so I haven't really been affected by it that much, but I do know a good few of my friends have had their whole weeks cancelled. Some of my friends have gone home for a couple of weeks. I mean, obviously it's really, really not ideal, but I do understand that lecturers need to do what they have to in order to get fair treatment from the university. So as much as it does annoy me, I do know that these things need to happen.
So after different discussions amongst the SABs and after consultation with our governing body, which is DRC, Democracy and Representation, we have decided that the union is going to stay neutral in this conversation. We've done that so it allows us to lobby and interact with both stakeholders, both the UCU and the university.
So what should students expect from LSU in the next week or so?
So we've tried to open up as many communication channels as possible. So I have sent out an email to all students in all levels of their academic journey, postgrad, taught postgrad research and undergrads, informing them of how they can get in touch with me, as well as the student representatives amongst their cohorts. So course reps, doctoral researcher reps, their presidents, their vice presidents. So people they should look after or look for within their own student bodies, as well as myself. So I've blocked out my calendar every day for 2 hours to make sure students come in and have a chat with me, as well as roaming around campus 3 times during the strikes and going down to the London campus for a full day too.
The university have released a statement and provided information on their website, including, "We intend to do everything we can, working closely with the Students Union and UCU, to ensure that there is no impact on your marks or degree qualifications, and that any impact on your studies from any industrial action before Christmas is minimised and, where necessary, taken into account as appropriate in any assessment." As you can see, it's a very complex situation with many parties involved. Hopefully, by the end of next week, there will be a decision which benefits both parties. This has been Amie Woodyatt for LSUTV.
So, you went down there, you spoke to the people who were involved. What was your take on the strikes?
I think it's a very, very, as I said, complex situation. As a English student, I lost a lot of lectures. I lost a lot of lectures a couple of years ago when we had the strikes. I know it affects a lot of students very differently. I think a lot of engineering, I believe, don't really have any lectures kind of cut. So it affects people very differently. However, it's a very important topic, and I obviously want to make sure that the people who are teaching me the content are, you know, have the correct working conditions and making sure they're being paid correctly. So I think it is a very difficult situation. I'm glad to have lectures again. I've been ill this week, so I haven't attended all of them. But I'm very glad to be able to learn things again, which is obviously what we're paying for. But yeah, it's very, very difficult. I understand why people are doing it. It's just very unfortunate that it does affect the students in quite extreme ways in cases.
I think when you look at it, it does kind of affect potentially this argument about tuition fees as well, and it brings it into the mix. And obviously, you know, the Lib Dems have not had the strongest argument on this recently, which probably hasn't helped their case. But also, you know, parties like, you know, the Conservative Party and Labour, they've got very distinct different stances on that. Do you think that's affected or will affect what happens here in Loughborough?
Yeah, I think it will certainly be quite interesting. I know it was quite interesting when we had the debate in LSU that the Lib Dem candidate basically stood up and said, "I think tuition fees are actually necessary. That it's required part of the economy to make that actually work." Whereas you had the Stuart Brady for Labour saying actually he would scrap them completely, and on the other hand, you had the Tory candidate saying that they were also equally necessary. I thought it was quite interesting that the Lib Dem candidate took one side and didn't actually propose any kind of lowering, as the recent report has said, or anything of that kind of nature.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see that kind of dynamic evolve and see what happens. I mean, you know, maybe Labour won't win a majority, but it might affect their seats.
I think actually quite an interesting thing on that, on the fees thing. Obviously, for a lot of students, having their fees lowered would be lovely. However, I actually was chatting to an international student, I think only last week, and she pointed out something that as a home student I hadn't really considered, in that if home fees are dropped or completely scrapped, international fees may actually go up. And I know quite a few international students, they do subsidise our fees. And yeah, I think it would, a lot of people probably wouldn't be able to come to UK universities if they went up even more, because currently, you know, fees can be up to like 25, 28, if not £30,000 for international students. It's a huge amount of money. So I think it's very interesting to see how they will be voting and how that affects how their friends vote, especially in kind of university constituencies. So.
And I think it was quite interesting that in the VCs and universities' response to the lecturer strike action, that he effectively set out that without either more money coming from tuition fees, i.e. increasing with inflation, or without fewer staff on the books, there wasn't really a feasible way that he could see of their pension demands being met. I thought that was quite interesting to find out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting and to see that kind of dynamic and what happens here in Loughborough, but also nationally. That picture might affect, there's a lot of students, across the university from all kind of pre-1992 universities that have been affected by this. They obviously had a long week where they've not had much to do. Maybe that will affect their voting turnout. But obviously students are very important to us here at LSUTV. They're a core part of why we exist. In fact, they're the only reason why we exist. And the only reason why we're able to bring this show to you this evening is because they're fantastic people over in our gallery and newsroom. I think we've got Josh down there. Yes, there he is.
Hello, you should be able to hear me. Welcome to the studio. We're here in the gallery. We've got all our camera feeds here and the amazing team bringing you tonight's broadcast. So yeah, how are things over there in the studio?
I mean, it's a bit hot, a bit stuffy. Hopefully the aircon's working a bit better over there for you. But what are you all making about this election? You've got obviously a lot of researchers down there and a lot of other members of staff. How do you think the election's going?
Yeah, so far we've got all our researchers scouring social media for any of the breaking news stories. We're getting live updates through, so at the moment we're just getting a stream of information. We're trying to make sense as best we can. But obviously, as the night's still young, with so many seats left to declare, things are only set to get busier, I think.
Absolutely. So, if someone wants to get involved in student media, they want to get involved with doing things like LSUTV, big live broadcasts like this, as the Vice Chair of LSU Media yourself, how would you suggest they get involved?
So on Facebook, if you search LSU Media, you can go and look at our page on there. Give us a follow. You can see some of the amazing content that our incredible volunteers produce. But based here, we're in the Students Union on the first floor. So as you go up the stairs from Piazza, turn left and you'll find directions into our media centre here where we are tonight. Feel free to come along and say hello if you've got any questions or want to learn how to use some camera gear or some software. Then we're always, friendly and welcoming to anyone, whether you're a complete newbie or you've done, any sort of media before. But yeah, no, we're always welcoming and look forward to meeting people as and when they feel like coming over and saying hi.
Amazing. And finally, yourself, Chris and Piers are there on the gallery desk doing graphics, doing visual mixing and directing. What do you three think about the election? What is your number, your final number for the Conservatives? It's currently 368 on the exit poll. Do you think it'll be higher or lower?
I guess I'll go first on this one. I think we could see slightly lower, so I'm going to go with about 362 is my prediction. Chris, what about you?
I think it's hard to say. It's early days. It's early days at the moment. I think there's a lot more results to come in. However, I think the Blyth result, if that's indicative of the rest of the results, I think it's going to be a really tough night for Labour.
Yep, and finally, Piers over here on graphics.
I'll contradict you there, Josh, and I'll say Labour will have more, but we'll see during the night. I'll be keeping updated on the feed.
But yeah, it looks set to definitely get busier now with lots of seats still counting and getting ready to declare. So we're going to be here at the hot desk and ready as they get called. So over back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you very much to all of you down there in the studio. Piers, your coffee machine is fantastic. I can smell the coffee from in here. I will be requesting one at some point. You're a genius for bringing that in this evening. We'll be needing it certainly as we go later on in the night. So, lots of results that have been so far in this first hour of our show. The key thing is, don't cancel your Christmas. Politics is going to continue. We've got we'll have a few more days of Parliament, which will they'll sit again after this election in a week before Christmas. We'll have at least 3 or 4 parliamentary sitting days. I wouldn't expect Boris Johnson to go and cancel the Christmas holidays. It's possible. You may get a few more days sitting in between Christmas and New Year. But don't cancel your Christmas. Don't sit in front of the sofa watching BBC Parliament all the time, as I know you all are. What do you do you think this will affect Christmas much? Do you think this Brexit argument going over Christmas, do you think Christmas dinner tables will be different to what they could have been if it had been a Labour victory?
Christmas tables are always difficult when it comes to politics. I think it could possibly kind of bring up more arguments, depending on if you've got a lot of young people in the family. They may be a bit angry if we do have what the polls are currently suggesting. But yeah, I think it will definitely be an interesting discussion. I don't think Christmas will be cancelled. I think if we do have a Conservative majority, for a lot of people, that will be a very sad thing. And I think that will affect a lot of people. But I think Christmas shouldn't be cancelled, and I think that we should, no matter who we are, we should try and make the most of the festive cheer, and make sure that we eat many mince pies and jam tarts.
and I think the key point is we've had several senior Tory party members come out and say that they would like to move on as quickly as possible after this election. That they would like, as you've said, in that week of time that they may or may not have, they'd like to crack on, get some bills moving through the various reading stages. So that I guess the Tories are hoping that date of the 31st of January is still on in some regard. Whether they'll get there or not is to be seen.
Well, absolutely. We've got to expect a Brexit Christmas for all of you here at home. It's going to be a fantastic time, clearly. Can't wait. But importantly, we need to focus again, before we go to a break, on what's happening here in Loughborough. Paul down there is with Lewis, the LSU college college president now, and they're down at the count together, thinking about how it's going to go.
Yes, we are here at the count at Loughborough Leisure Centre. I'm here with Lewis. Lewis, how do you think students have got involved in this election?
I think students got massively involved in this election. I think it's the most encouraging student turnout we've seen so far, especially with the trending hashtags on Twitter that was trending about 20,000 trending youthquake on Twitter. It was just massive.
And obviously the exit polls are saying that this will probably be a Conservative hold this seat. We have no new information on when the results will be, probably around 4 or 5 a.m. Do you think the student population will have influenced the way that that's gone?
It's hard to tell, really. I think that people are going to go out and they're going to vote for what is best for them. And I think people are just going to, there's not...
It's very difficult to tell, isn't it? Yeah.
Speculate on what is going to happen, because it could swing anyway.
So you were here during the 2017 general election. Do you think there's been any difference between that election and this election?
Well, I wasn't as involved in the 2017 election because I was too young to vote, but I think that I've massively seen so much youth turnout this election that I think that it's got to be one of the best turnouts for youth that there's been, honestly.
Certainly a lot of us who have voted have been, seeing so many young people at the polls, which is always very good to see.
Definitely. It's always good to see young people exercising their right to vote, because, about a third of young people didn't, and I think that that's really changed with the encouragement to vote that the government has pushed.
So thank you very much for that interview, and I'll just pass over back to Josh Gray, who Stuart Brady has compared to Jeremy Paxman.
Oh, blimey. I'm not sure that comparison is quite perfect, but thank you very much to you, Stuart, and also to you, Paul, and Lewis down there in the studio. It's been one hell of an hour. We've lost, we've lost a seat for the Labour Party. The Conservatives have gained one. We've had more results than we probably expected. We've had a recount. It's been a fantastic hour of politics.
Yeah, it's been very exciting. We've had members of the Tory party come out and say they didn't expect to win Blyth Valley. Apparently, when Ian, I can't remember his name, Ian for the Tory party came out and won, he was very shocked when he got up on stage. He did not expect to win that seat at all. We've also seen the DUP come and say that they think a big majority will be useful for the country, which I think is quite interesting, even though their seats won't be declared yet for several hours.
And we've just got one more declaration to hold off before we go on our half-an-hour break. Newcastle upon Tyne East has been held by Labour, no surprise there, but on a reduced majority again. The majority before was 19,000, it's now 15,000. So 4,000 down there. Nick Brown has stayed and remained the MP for Newcastle upon Tyne, with Robyn Gwynne from the Conservative Party not able to take over there. We've got generally this kind of idea that actually we're losing, this majority that the Tories had is going up. So it's going to be an interesting election.
Yeah, certainly, and with as you said, with them losing 5,000 votes there, not quite as much as we've seen in the other Newcastle seat or in Blyth Valley, but it's still a significant hurt to the Labour strongholds.
And I have a feeling in the half an hour break that we'll be taking, we'll get a result from Bolsover. It's very much looking like we're going to have a Conservative there for the first time in many, many years. I'm not aware of a Conservative being in Bolsover. It's certainly not happened for the last 45 odd years because Dennis Skinner's been the MP. They're celebrating there already. This is a night of celebration for the Tory party and a night of commiseration for the Labour Party. I'd like to say thank you to the two guests who have been here in the studio with me for this hour. We'll have a couple more in the hour following. We'll be back here at around midnight. Thank you very much for Amie and Ben. We're back in a bit.